What is the most underrated watch brand today? The brand that does everything right, makes great watches at reasonable price points, but just doesn't quite get the recognition they deserve? Well, that question isn't as simple to answer as you might think, because the term underrated gets thrown around quite a lot in the watch industry. So, what does underrated truly mean? Well, to me, it means a brand whose quality and value for money outpace the attention that they receive. That gap between the attention the brand receives and what it actually gets is what we're trying to measure here today. So in this video, I want to share 3 honorable mentions for watch brands that I think are the most underrated today, and then share my pick for the most underrated watch brand today. Before I get started, please let me know in the comment section down below what brands you think are the most underrated today. And one more thing before we get started, I want to share my criteria for how I determine the brands that I mentioned in this video. I always seem to come back to the same 2 pillars: overall catalog diversity and value for money. Catalog diversity is really looking for brands that have at least a variety of different choices within their catalog in different segments of the watch world. Do they have a diver, a dress watch, an everyday piece? It doesn't have to be perfect, they don't have to encapsulate every single category, but I'd like to see at least an attempt towards having a variety of watches. And value for money, which arguably is more important, is of course looking for really great quality watches at reasonable price points. No matter how good the watches are, the brands themselves that they come from are going to be very underrated if they're not fairly priced. So with that brief criteria in mind, let's go ahead and jump right into it with the first honorable mention. So the first brand I want to mention here today is Timex. And if you cut back to 10 years ago, their inclusion on this list or in this video would not really make too much sense. Timex has long been known for making very affordable quartz-powered watches that you could find at most retailers like Target, Walmart, and many others. Watches like the Timex Weekender and Expedition come to mind as really solid pieces that do have the respect of watch collectors, but they aren't exactly game-changing pieces. That association with relatively cheap battery-operated watches that are very common to find in many stores had definitely hindered the brand. But over the past 10 years or so, they've really tried to fight their way back into prominence, and they've done a really good job of doing so. I mean, we have to remember Timex has been around for a long time, and in many ways they are the face of American watchmaking. Timex's comeback into prevalence within the watch world really started in 2017 with the reintroduction of the Timex Marlin collection. The Marlin serves as a really great looking, relatively affordable, classically styled mechanical dress watch that watch collectors really do have a lot of respect for. Timex would then follow up the Marlin with the reintroduction of the Timex Q lineup, and more specifically, they introduced a new GMT, which everyone seemed to fall in love with. And ever since then, Timex has been really firing on all cylinders, making great watches across every single price point, all the way up into the multiple thousands of dollars with Swiss automatic watches. Watches like the Timex Marlin Jet come to mind as a really great mid-century modern-inspired dress watch, and a piece like the Timex Expedition North, which is a legitimately great titanium field watch. Combine that with Timex nailing basically every collaboration they do, and you have the makings of a really great brand. And as I mentioned a second ago, Timex has even encroached on the Swiss watch industry, making their own Swiss automatic pieces under the Timex Atelier lineup. Although it might be crazy to see a Timex watch with a price tag of $1,000 to $2,000, these pieces are legitimately well made and really have some great specifications and look just fantastic. And if you put it all together, Timex has really become a great underrated brand that I have to mention in this video. The main reason why I did not choose Timex as the most underrated brand today is simply because Timex has only recently started making these Swiss automatic watches that I think have really carried their brand to a new level, so I kind of want to see how the rest of the watch world reacts as they continue to develop these pieces. So the next watch brand that deserves an honorable mention as the most underrated brand today is the German brand Sinn. So Sinn has been around for quite some time now, starting in the early 60s in Frankfurt, Germany, and they are a brand that is mostly based around making really high quality and capable tool watches. Most experienced watch collectors are very familiar with the brand Sinn, but I do think they are vastly underrated in the watch world today. And there's a good chance that their distribution strategy has played a large role in the fact that they're very underrated today. For those that are not familiar, they don't really have a traditional setup like other watch brands do. They're not going to be found in traditional jewelry stores or watch stores, so to get them, it's a bit more of a process. I think that has certainly hindered their overall awareness in the United States of how good of a brand they truly are, but if anything, that just makes them more underrated and a great selection for this video. And when you talk about the brand Sinn, you have to start with the 556, which is really their go anywhere, do anything watch. and is pretty much one of the most highly respected everyday pieces you can buy. Many times the 556 is referenced as a great alternative at a cheaper price point to the Rolex Explorer and the Omega Aquaterra, which are very common luxury everyday pieces. And one of the main calling cards to the brand Sinn that has really made them really the go-to in great tool watches at a relatively affordable price point is their signature tegimented steel. This essentially makes their watches even harder to scratch, furthering how good of a tool watch brand they really are. I think it's also worth bringing up a couple of their other pieces just to show you that they do have a lot of great catalog diversity, starting with the 104, which is their signature pilot watch. Despite technically being classified as a pilot watch, the Sinn 104 actually has 200 meters of water resistance and has a countdown bezel that you'll find typical on a dive watch, but really that just makes this piece even more versatile. And harkening back to my original criteria for this video, Sinn is really good at having great overall catalog diversity, even having a signature chronograph with the 356. This could be one of the best looking chronographs in the game today, and again, these watches are at pretty reasonable price points. The average Sinn watch is going to be cheaper than the average Omega, Rolex, Breitling, and these other sort of big name brands. It's hard to not be super intrigued by the brand Sinn, especially with that value for money piece. As someone who owns the Rolex Explorer, I know I've certainly looked at the Sinn 556 for a long time, thinking about how much money I would get back if I sold my Rolex and traded it out for the Sinn. I also just want to give a quick shout out to my new favorite Sinn watch, the 308, which is actually their hunting watch. It essentially has a moon phase complication that tells you the best conditions at nighttime for hunting, which is just pretty cool and unique and something I'd never heard of before. So yeah, overall, Sinn is a really great watch brand with a great series of tool watches. But the main reason why I couldn't pick them for the most underrated watch brand today is mostly because they don't really have any dressier watches to choose from. I get it, that's not really their overall philosophy, but as someone who's looking for overall catalog diversity here, I do have to knock them for that. I also don't know if their overall design language is really meant for everyone, but again, that's really more of a personal thing. But yeah, you overall cannot go wrong with Sinn. Great watches at a pretty reasonable price point. So the final watch brand that I want to include here as an honorable mention for the most underrated brand today is Frederique Constant. FC is in a really odd spot within the watch world in my opinion. If you're a seasoned watch collector, you more than likely are familiar with the brand and have great respect for what they do. Despite their great work, it feels like they just don't really get mentioned as much as they really should. When you first enter the hobby of watch collecting, they're certainly a brand that you should be made aware of, but I don't think many people talk about them, and I think a lot of new collectors just kind of miss them. One potential reason for that is that they are technically a relatively new brand as far as watch brands go, starting in 1988. In a world where brands date back all the way to the 1800s, that is pretty new. But like I said, when you dive deep into the brand, you very quickly realize how great they are. And as a fun fact, they actually have 35 in-house calibers to their name, which is pretty ridiculous for a brand of their age. They most recently shocked the watch world with their own version of a perpetual calendar in their manufacturer lineup of watches, and this piece is just ridiculous for being about $10,000. Automatic perpetual calendar watches under $10,000 are basically non-existent, so the fact that they made this watch is just incredible. And on top of that, it's just a really great looking watch. If you took off the script that says Frederique Constant and put in Patek Philippe, and you told me it was a true Patek, I probably would believe you. Frederique Constant also recently renovated their World Timer watch, which is a part of the same manufacturer lineup of watches that include the perpetual calendar. And honestly, ever since I saw it, I've kind of fallen in love with it. And if I were to buy one Frederique Constant, I think it would be this one. This new World Timer uses a beautifully decorated in-house automatic caliber, and actually this World Timer can all be manipulated by the singular crown. Of course, Frederique Constant has other series of watches in their catalog other than the manufacturer series that we've been talking about. They also have the Classic series, which has the beautiful Moneta. The Moneta and the solar version of the Moneta, which just came out, are absolutely stunning watches, and I really want to get my hands on the new solar version. It is just so stunning. This is actually Frederique Constant's first ever time utilizing a solar movement, and this new movement is titled the FC120. You can get the Moneta lineup of watches for about $1,500, and like I said with the perpetual calendar, these pieces are so well designed that in my opinion, I could easily confuse them with a Patek Philippe, a Vacheron, or an Audemars Piguet. They look that good in my opinion. So where does Frederique Constant fall short? Because again, I did not pick them as the most underrated brand today. Well, in my opinion, it's the fact that they don't really have any true sport watches. They do have the High Life series of watches, which is their attempt at a sportier piece, but they don't have any dive watches. They don't really have a really great gata or everyday piece, in my opinion. A lot of their pieces really skew to the dressier side of things. As a buyer, I've always really leaned more towards the sportier or everyday side of watches, and so the fact that Frederique Constant doesn't really have a great option in the dive space and everyday space has really held them back in my opinion. But that should not take away from the fact that Frederique Constant truly is a really great brand and should be definitely recognized. Okay, so that all being said, what brand am I picking to be the most underrated brand today? And in my opinion, without a doubt, it is Raymond Weil. Despite being a brand that is very often overlooked, I truly think Raymond Weil is on a course to becoming one of the hottest brands in the world today. Similar to Sinn and Frederique Constant, Raymond Weil is actually a relatively new brand in terms of the watch world, starting in 1976. And one thing that I love about Raymond Weil is despite the watch world being full of huge conglomerate companies that own so many small brands like the Swatch Group and LVMH and the Richemont Group, Raymond Weil is independent and actually always has been. And for the longest time, Raymond Weil was in a really comfortable middle ground within the watch industry. They made pretty high quality Swiss watches, but none of them really broke into the mainstream and none of them really elevated the brand to new heights. But that all changed in 2023 when Raymond Weil came out with the Millésime lineup of watches. The Raymond Weil Millésime Small Seconds actually won the GPHG Challenge Prize, and for those unfamiliar, that's basically the Oscars of Watchmaking's award for the best watch under 2,000 Swiss francs. Everyone seemed to fall in love with the beautiful styling, the sector dial, and the in-house Sellita-based caliber. And Raymond Weil capitalized on this by actually expanding the Millésime series of watches to a moon phase and a chronograph. In fact, I fell so in love with the Millésime lineup of watches that I bought one myself. I recently purchased the Raymond Weil Millésime Moon Phase, and it's just a spectacular piece. And like I said, I fell in love with it from the moment I saw it, and I had to own one. And to be honest with you, I really struggled with my decision to buy this Raymond Weil Millésime Moon Phase, which I think a lot of you could potentially relate to. And the main reason why I struggled is because it's a Raymond Weil, and there's a reason why I chose this brand as the most underrated watch brand today. And I was honestly just a bit afraid to spend a couple $1,000s on a watch that most people had never heard of before. But thankfully I was able to see past that, and despite it not being a Rolex, a Grand Seiko, or an Omega, it's a really spectacular watch from a brand that, like I said, is really, really hot right now. But the success of Raymond Weil is not limited to the Millésime series of watches. They've actually hit pretty much all of their other new releases. I have to mention the new Toccata lineup from Raymond Weil, which is basically their version of a Patek Philippe Ellipse, which looks so great. If you're someone who loves the look of the Patek Philippe Ellipse, then this is the watch for you. It really looks fantastic, has great dimensions, and has a great movement in the back as well. Raymond Weil also recently came out with their new collection called the A.R.T series, which is essentially their answer to the sports watch. Now you'll quickly realize that this watch looks very similar to the IWC Ingenieur, but at the end of the day, it is a great looking watch with some pretty good specifications. And many have pointed out that this watch was likely in pre-production and being conceptualized well before the IWC Ingenieur was re-released. And in my opinion, the piece de resistance for the Raymond Weil catalog is their Freelancer Complete Calendar, which is a complete calendar for about $3,500. When this watch came out, it absolutely shocked the watch world, and for good reason. This is a complete calendar, as I mentioned, for about $3,500, and it's about 10 millimeters thick, which is just crazy. For fun context, the Vacheron Constantin complete calendar is about $35,000, so for 10 times less, you can get this Raymond Weil. Now those watches are not the same, but it is a great comparison. Raymond Weil does not have a perfect catalog. They certainly are missing some key watches, for example, a signature dive watch, but in my opinion, they have a great catalog that offers true great value for money. And like I said, I was very hesitant to buy a Raymond Weil watch, but I was able to see through my preconceived notions of the brand and just look for the great specifications and great value for money that they offer. I just seem to fall in love with every new release from Raymond Weil, and with most of their catalog being under $2,000, I just think they have to be recognized as the most underrated watch brand today. I am very excited to do a full review of my new Raymond Weil Millésime Moonphase, so stay tuned for that. But that all being said, let me know in the comment section down below what you think about my picks for this video. What do you think about my honorable mentions, and what do you think about my pick for the most underrated watch brand today? I'm very excited to see what you guys have to say, and I'm excited to interact with you all down below. And if you enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you can give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you.